length that I was looking for. Just wanted to kind of ask you about some of your topics here and kind of get maybe a little bit more full of an explanation. Um, so my first question, let's see. I just read through everybody's meet the candidate from the Tribune. So if I say something that is wrong, don't feel free to correct me. But it looks like that you support the paid parking. Um, is that's correct, right?
Okay, so in a rather reserved and guarded manner, yes. I think that there's significant questions that have to be answered about it.
Okay.
When I was mayor before, we looked at this, we looked at it in some detail, and we advanced the proposal to the city council to take it up as a topic and do all the homework and everything from the DDA side. And we said that this looks like a good proposal that would help maintain our parking and put money back into parking. So, it would be for that program for public parking basically. And about the time it was supposed to be on council's agenda, well, the high water happened, and then the COVID happened, and then SIMS happened, all kinds of stuff happened, and we never got back to it. So then, after I was out of office, they brought it back up. And so my questions with it are, where should it be? What's equitable for the people? I think that by and large, taxpayers support all the parking in town, all the public-owned parking. And so, I think that people who are just using it should be contributing to the cost of that. And so, if visitors, people from out of town, come and use our parking, and all the homeowners in town are paying for it, then it'd be appropriate to collect something. And I think that could help the city with some of its budget shortfalls. But you've got to make sure that you're not going to hurt the tourist market, that you're not going to drive people away. You got to make sure that you're doing it in a place where it's appropriate for visitors to be asked to pay because they need to get some value for their money. And so I think you got to look very carefully at where it's going to be. You got to look at things like in our South Side neighborhood or even our Old Town neighborhood, both north and south of downtown. In the summertime, on a good beach day, especially on a weekend, those neighborhoods are just overrun with people who are trying to park who can't park down by the beach, and so they're parking in the neighborhoods. And if you have paid parking, is that going to make that worse, or is that going to have no effect, or just how's that going to work? So I think there's some significant questions to answer. You got to make sure that they're going to make money on this if they're going to do it, so it can't just be a wash, because there's a cost to implementing it. But if all the research looks promising, then I think that it's just something that's worth trying. Simply
Okay.
because I think it'd be more equitable for all of our taxpayers and businesses if people were contributing to the cost of parking.
Okay. Now, I know that one of the candidates is against like a parking structure. Is that something that you'd be interested in looking into? I didn't see it addressed in the article, but is a parking structure something that you're interested in now, or something that you would consider in the future?
Well, I'm not really interested in it at this time, and I'm not sure that there's a demand for it at this time. And it's hard to say what the future would hold as far as the evolving needs of the parking, but there's quite a bit of surface parking around, and there's ways to get to it which are more practical than building a structure. And if you build a structure and it's empty most of the time, that's just going to be a cost center for us. What the city can't do is build something that's going to be, number one, a cost. It's got to at least pay for itself. And number two, something that's going to be objectionable to the community, or a white elephant because it's not being utilized enough. And so the parking structure could someday be worth doing, but I don't think it's worth doing at this time. What would make more sense at this time, I think, would be some kind of a shuttle system, trolley system, something that would move people from more remote lots to downtown and back. And we do have some work with our Harbor Transit people to move people around so that when parking is really full, that people can be parked a little farther away and get to where they want to go without having to invest millions of dollars in a parking structure. So a parking structure would be a pretty significant capital investment. As long as there's free or cheap surface parking elsewhere, I don't know that people would use the parking structure that much. So I'd say at this point in time, no, there's not really a demand and not really need to go there. What the future holds, I'm always open to possibilities, but you got to make the case for it. You don't make the case for it, then you don't go there.
Okay. Now, one of the other issues that you had brought up was the shortage and the excessive cost of housing. Um, you said that the city must have a strategy, and that affordable housing and the problems of homelessness are part of this. Um, what would you see, or do you have a strategy in mind that you would want to alleviate this problem with, or is that something that you're working on at all?
Well, this is going to be a tough one because the market operates independent of the city, and the city doesn't have some of the like in big cities. Sometimes you see cities that are deeply involved in housing issues and running housing departments. We don't do that here. We're a small city. We don't have those resources, so the housing market is what it is, and in our city, there's a lot of demand for the housing from people who can afford to pay more for it, and they tend to soak up some of that extra housing that's available, so that people who are working for a living, who have a lower income or are trying to raise young families, it's harder for them to get into houses simply because either they've been turned into short-term rentals or they're being used by retirees or the tourist market. So some of our housing is just kind of taken off the market or made so expensive that it's hard for people to break into it. We had a Tuesday morning forum series from the Chamber of Commerce. One of the speakers that came there talked about the starter homes in the bottom rung of housing and how hard it is for people nowadays to find starter homes. I mean, when I was younger, starter homes were something where it was a basic house, small house, but you bought it because you could afford it. You moved up as you were able to. And those houses are harder to come by now, partly because they're used for other things, partly because there just hasn't been a lot of new housing built, at least not in the city. And so it's a tighter market than it used to be, and it's hard for people to break into that market. So, I mean, it's the city has tried to do things to encourage the private sector to provide more options for housing. We did change the ordinance a couple of years back to allow for smaller dwelling units and accessory dwelling units and just some other options. Unfortunately, some of those got taken up with as more high-end investments, and so they kind of missed the mark. And maybe someday the price of those will come down if the market gets filled out enough. The other thing we've done though is we used to have a neighborhood housing service department, which did counseling for people and which helped people get grant funded or subsidized loans for house improvements or for additions or for just basic repairs. That's no longer in place. We have developed a small neighborhood on the south end of town through our community land trust, and that's a partial solution. Again, it provided some homes. And they're basic starter homes, but there's something that's priced at the lower end of the market for people who can qualify for mortgages, but who are also, that's the typical ALS population. They're asset limited, and they have income, and they're just not quite able to break into the higher end market. So we provided a few houses that way, but it's a drop in the bucket. There's such a demand. We had 16 houses for sale. We had 200 applications. So it's just a large problem. I think it's going to take a number of strategies. It's going to take a continuous effort. It's going to take new ideas, old ideas, whatever seems to work and produce results. So I think the main thing is to keep the attention on it, and make it so that we can put whatever resources are available to it and work with partners such as, Habitat for Humanity is one of the partners. Some of the charitable groups with some of our churches work with people who need either shelter or some kind of housing help. There's partners we can work with. There's things we can do on our own, but it's just such a large problem, such a complicated problem that I think the best thing we can do is keep it in our minds, keep it in our ideas, try things, see what works. Whatever doesn't work, you don't do, but you don't try anything and just keep doing the same things, and you're going to have the same problem. So until there's some kind of major market correction that's beyond our control, I think we just have to keep experimenting and keep in mind that there are homeless people in this town. There are people who are um, unable to have their own housing or independence, and so those people deserve to live here. They work here, they're citizens of the city, or want to be, or deserve to be, or they grew up here and they had to move away. I think that we just need to do whatever we can to provide more options.
Okay. Um, Now this wasn't addressed in the article, but one of the big things, one of the big issues in Grand Haven right now is Harbor Island.
Yes.
Um, what are your ideas on the cleanup, future development, the future use of that land? Anything that you're working on in that respect, or that you would like to see Grand Haven move toward?
Well, yes, actually. So when the Sims plant came down, and they started to do the basic coal combustion residual, which is the coal ash. They had to clean up their holding ponds. They had to clean up some legacy stuff that was on the ground, and along with the demolition of the plant. But then in the course of doing that, we realized that we were going to have to do some dewatering. So naturally, then you test the groundwater to see what you have to dewater, and they found that, well, underlying this whole site was an old city dump. Well, the city dump was in service since the late 19th century, right up until 1970. It was finally closed. So for all those years, it accumulated household trash, it accumulated coal ash for people's homes, it accumulated industrial waste. We had batteries in town, so there's tannery waste. And there's just a lot of stuff that's buried out there. We accepted waste from neighboring communities. The whole idea behind all that was they wanted to build an island, because Harbor Island was originally kind of a marshy sandbar, it was vegetated sandbar. It was out of the water some of the time, it was underwater some of the time. By putting all the stuff out there, they built up the land and made it usable land. And it was basically landfill and ash and burned stuff, and so it's kind of a mess. So when they did the testing for the groundwater, they started finding things like, the PFAS. It's all the headlines, but there's also heavy metals. There's volatile organics. There's a variety of things in the groundwater which are not a real high concentration, but they do exist. And the fear is that these things, because they're migrating through the groundwater, they get out to the river, they eventually might end up in the river or in the lake. And of course, our water intake is just outside of the river channel, because we draw our water from Lake Michigan. So the concern there was, okay, you have all this stuff. If we have to start dewatering and removing stuff, what do we do with it? How do we clean that up? Or is it better to leave it alone and try to encapsulate it so that it can't move out into the river? So my view on this is, okay, let's do no harm. Let's do no more harm than has been done. If that means that we want to make sure that this stuff that's underground in Harbor Island can't escape, can't get into the river, can't get into the lake, then we'd be doing no harm by trying to segregate it, encapsulate it, and cap it. So that would be one approach. I don't know if Eagle and EPA will allow us to do that. It depends on, right now they're studying the groundwater and the surface water escapes. So we don't know for sure when that's going to come out. But I would think that our first approach should be make sure that we don't create a bigger problem, try to clean up the problem that we have. If that means that we try to cap it, encapsulate it, and stabilize it, that might be, at least for the time being, might be the right thing to do. But if we do that, then I think that's going to limit our options on building anything on Harbor Island. So any kind of development, I think, is going to need to be very limited. There's who knows, someday there may be some great technological breakthrough that allows us to destroy all the pollution on site. Maybe we can do that someday, but we can't do that today. So until such a time comes, I think we should be very conservative, very careful about what we do there. So my feeling is that the best thing we can do on Harbor Island is to let it become a natural or a park-like area and not build stuff there, not use it intensively, use it just for casual or for people to enjoy the surface, or let it go back to being habitats for birds and animals. I think those would be worthy uses, and I think those would be less intrusive and a better way to conserve the island and protect it from the stuff that's there. My fear is that if we decide we want to build something really elaborate out there, something big investment, required to do more of the clean up, more of the removal, and that would have a bigger risk, and that we're going to end up with something that's just going to be incredibly expensive to do and risky to do. And I just don't see that as being a good option at this time. So my answer would be I would rather see it allowed to become either natural or park-like with very light use, like a leave no footprint type use, or very minimal things like right now we have a linear park with footpaths and things. So that would be an acceptable use. But as far as building structures, building new commercial or residential out there, I'm not seeing how that's really a viable option. So I would rather see us be very careful and very conservative and do minimal touch on that island.
Okay, thank you for those answers. I have some maybe more social issues, questions like maybe a little bit more dicey here. So there's been a lot of controversy surrounding like some of the events going on in Grand Haven, specifically the drag queen stuff that was going on during Pride and that stuff down on the lakeshore. As mayor, are you going to be supporting those kinds of things? Are you going to be more where do you stand on things like that taking place and out in public?
Okay, so I think that for the Pride Fest, for example, I think that was a good way to promote acceptance and understanding and put issues of potential of discrimination or a marginalized community out in the open where people could appreciate that these people are part of our community, they have value as human beings, and that they have been kind of overlooked or pushed aside. And so something like the Pride Festival, I think that's a very good thing to do. The specifics of how it's operated and such, the city makes the space available, the people can use it, and from what I saw during the festival, everything was people were having a good time, and people were having it was like having quite a nice party, and nothing seemed really out of order. My personal feeling is that sometimes you've got to tone things down a bit, but you still got to make sure that people are accepted and people are able to express themselves. So, regardless of what I think about my personal reaction to a specific behavior might be, that's kind of irrelevant. I think that the real important piece here is that these folks were able to express themselves and be interacting with the larger community. So those sorts of things need to happen. I think that's an important piece, and any personal reservations that any individual politician might have should be carefully looked at as, this is, it doesn't matter what your personal feelings are. The important thing is to take care of these folks.
Okay. There's been some controversy surrounding so I'm going to get into like a specific event from down there. There was pictures of children at this event, and the drag queens taking people's faces and putting them in their breasts and performing quite sexual acts out in public. Is that something that you're gonna be more like a hands-off politician, shouldn't be getting involved in anything like that as well, or is there some sort of like public decency code that you think politicians should be looking into for like explicitly sexual acts in public, or kind of where do you stand on something like that?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and so I appreciate you wanting me to ask a difficult question. This is one of those things where I think that people can express opinions and show some restraint and ask for people to be respectful of other people's sensibilities. I don't think we have an enforceable code that says no, you can or cannot do specific things. I think it comes down to the just the way that conversations are held between different people as far as what do you think is appropriate in a public display, what do you think is not appropriate. But I guess I would come down on the side of being more permissive rather than less. The example I might try to set for myself would be to be more restrained and more respectful of the sensibilities of people around me. You get into a situation where it's hard to say where does this become judgmental. I don't want to be there, but I also want to make sure that inappropriate things are being a little more subdued. So, I mean, I have a daughter who's a transsexual or a transgender person. So my transgender daughter is not one who would do big overt displays and things. She's more modest than that. She's more reserved than that, and she just doesn't like to put herself out there. So I kind of feel the way that she might feel that, okay, you're accepted, you're a part of the community, we love you, part of the family, and we respect everything you've had to go through, and let's just accept you as a human being. It doesn't necessarily require that we have a large, big elaborate display of that. I think it's enough for people to show some restraint, some respect, and some just be aware of how people around you feel. Now, there again, I'm not sure you can say that that's something has some enforceable element to it, other than the only other thing you can do is just tell people just can't do anything at all, and I'm not going to do that. So I would rather have people be on their, really have people, what I want to try to say, I'd rather have people take that responsibility on themselves and be sensitive and be respectful of each other. I think if you can be there, a lot of these problems go away.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I think the last, kind of hot button issue here, and maybe the last question for now that I have for you. So one of your opponents came out very strongly against Ottawa Impact, and I think that she's looking for that to kind of help in her run for Grand Haven mayor. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on Ottawa Impact. Do you have anything positive to say about them, negative to say about them, or the way they've run things? And yeah, just giving you a chance to kind of explain your position there.
Okay, so I don't have anything good to say about Ottawa Impact. All I can say is that the city and the county have historically worked very closely together on many public policy matters. That there are programs and there are agencies within the county that the city relies on. That there's a certain amount of pass-through money that comes through federal and state agencies that we rely on the county to work with. The county has been doing our assessing for us, and we lean on the health department for a lot of things. And so there's a lot of intertwined responsibilities between the county and the city. And those things need to be preserved and cultivated because they're efficient. They're a good way to serve the public. Now, the Ottawa Impact people seem to be intent on dismantling a lot of that. That doesn't serve anybody's interest. So I'm not opposed to that. The things like some of the resolutions they passed, when they passed their constitutional county resolution, I went down there and spoke to them. I had to wait 4 hours for my turn to speak, and there was more people who waited a couple more hours after that. And I very strongly objected to that because I thought it was political posturing, which potentially would affect county budgets, department budgets, even the way the sheriff and prosecutor do their jobs. I thought that was very meddlesome and very inappropriate for the county to pass a resolution. For one thing, it has no legal standing. It's something that's just a lot of political theater, but it could also have an impact because of the way they choose to apply it to other things they do have power over. And they've done more of those resolutions. There's been a lot of turmoil with the county as far as their staff. Like I said, they brought in a different administrator, and now their deputy administrator has just resigned. They just can't seem to operate the county the way it should be operated. We had a very high-functioning county for a long, long, long time, and that high-functioning county administration is falling apart. And it's all because of this group. So, no, I'm very much opposed to what they're doing, I recognize and respect the fact that they were elected in their various districts, and that they feel that what they're doing is what they were elected to do. But I feel that they're doing the wrong things. So I'm opposed to a lot of what they do.
Okay. Is there anything specific that you would like just one thing, if they could do, something different that you would like to see, that would make like a big change in what they're doing, or yeah, just if you have one thing, I would
Oh
like.
boy.
It sounds like it might be kind of hard.
Well, that would be pretty difficult because they've structured their entire regime around dismantling important things that the county does. And so they need to go back to the basics of serving the people of the county with practical, pragmatic government decisions. The county was always run in a very business-like manner, and now it's being run in a very political and emotional manner. And they need to turn back to the way the county ought to operate by focusing on the needs of the people, the services provided to the people, and keeping the county as a economic engine, basically, instead of trying to turn it into some kind of a culture war or theater. So that's what they need to do.
Okay. Can you just give one example where you see that, like one of the things that they've dismantled that's been really harmful to our county, and like, do you have like specifics of how it's exactly affected the county?
Well, I know that, and I'm a little light on specifics here. I know that when they dismantled the DEI office, that was an unfortunate thing. I'm not sure how big of an economic impact it was, but a lot of our businesses and industries recognize the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion as far as workforce and fairness, and people being able to come to the county and be comfortable and be part of our growing community. Having that dismantled had an effect. I don't know yet how big of an effect, but it was a positive thing when it was created. So that's one of the first things they did. Some of the other stuff they're doing, a lot of the posturing they're doing, I think I don't think it's good for business. I don't think it's good for industry. I don't think it's good for anybody. And it focuses all the energy on the wrong things and basically on distractions. So as far as specifics, I have heard of some of the grants and things they've declined to apply for, left money on the table, just different things they don't think we should be doing. There's the big fuss about the public health department. The county health department has been really important to the communities within the county, and it's been something of a turmoil because of all the attempts to decapitate it. And so that's another thing that needs to get back to doing just the basic business. So, yeah, as far as other specific examples, I guess nothing real specific comes to mind, but there's just been a lot of that kind of flavor of things happening.
Okay. Well, Bob, I really appreciate all the questions that you answered. I know I gave you some hard ones there, so